Welcome back to this week's episode of the Lady Landlords podcast. This week, we have a member spotlight. This is one of the members in the Lady Landlords Facebook group that I really want to highlight because she just has such an amazing story. So I would like to introduce you to Krista. Krista, thank you so much for coming on the show today. How are you doing?
Absolutely. I'm doing really well today. Thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to be on the podcast this week.
Yes. Well, you have made such great strides in your own real estate portfolio that I'm really hoping that by kind of sharing what you have done and what you've done more recently here will really help kind of inspire and give some ideas to some of our listeners today. So if we could start with just kind of give like a little overview of who you are, where you came from. What does actual life look like for Krista?
Yeah, awesome. So, hi everyone. My name is Krista and I'm from the Philadelphia suburbs. I've been here my entire life. I've only left for the 4 years that I went to Penn State, which super passionate about. I'm a mom. I have 2 little ones at home. They keep me on my toes, keep me very busy. In my day life, my day job, I work for a tech company. So I work in customer success and manage client relationships, which is something that I love to do. But you could always say that I kind of have my hands in and out of many projects all the time. People who know me would say that I'm kind of a connector. I love helping people with things and helping people kind of get whatever they need in different situations. So yeah, I mean, basically the past couple of years, I've been working from home, managing my real estate business on the side. And if the past couple of years have taught us anything, it's that you really need to kind of, dig in and do what you want to do. So I'm excited to kind of share more about my story, but that's just a little bit about who I am, what takes up my time and what I've been doing.
And not only, I like that you mentioned that the past couple of years have definitely shown us we need to kind of go after the things that we're kind of looking for, but also it's kind of helpful when they also bring in extra money.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Right.
Yeah,
Especially with some of the uncertainty.
Yep.
So now you have, your corporate 9 to 5 type job. What made you say, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to invest in real estate. How did you get to that place?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I would like to say that part of my foundation was I used to study model home floor plans when I was a little child. Since we're building our kind of forever home, and I became obsessed with houses. I just loved everything about construction and building and just seeing it from start to finish. I was not even 10 years old and was really kind of obsessed with houses. But all kidding aside, that is very true. And that is part of kind of my origination. Before I went to college, my dad handed me Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I know that's very cliche. Every investor that as part of their story and their reading list. But he said, I want you to read this. I want you to, consider some of the lessons in here. And to be honest, I thought it was a great and easy read, but I didn't quite get it. It took me, a little bit of time to kind of understand where real estate was going to fit into my life. But my parents were always showing me and my 3 sisters how to be financially smart, how to put your money in safe places and not so safe places. They always were interested in real estate and building and investing. Mm-hmm. So I like to think for a lot of us investors, the spark is lit somewhere. It just sometimes takes a little bit of time for it to fully ignite. So for me, I think having my dad, recommend reading some books and things like that, that's where really the spark was lit. I want to tell you a bit more about my journey getting started in real estate in general. So I'll keep it brief. So I graduated from college and I actually took a job with a luxury home builder right around 2006 before the market crashed. It was a wonderful time to be in new home sales. I went through like a rigorous sales training and got a ton of experience with construction and building and all of those types of things. Then the market completely crashed about a year later, as we all know, and I ran for the hills and kind of joined corporate America and took a little bit of a hiatus from being involved in real estate. But then I decided I really wanted to help people. I thought, my day job is great, but I need to give back. I need to do more and really impact people. So I got my real estate license and I started practicing, helping my friends, neighbors, family, and then investors with their property purchases. And I learned so much in such a short amount of time about how the business works, how the transactions work, how lending works. And honestly, I've never looked back in terms of just diving head into something that was a little bit scary and a little bit unknown. So I would say my originations really came from me starting out working for the home builder, and then, getting my real estate license and actually starting as a practitioner.
I think it's so cool that you also have kind of these sprinklings through like your childhood. Once again, like looking at those floor plans. And that's clearly something like you remember that kind of was building on this idea that you just remember was something that you found like appealing, or that once again, we didn't know what you were going to end up doing with it, but at least was something that you were kind of already looking at and identifying as interesting. And listen, reading Rich Dad Poor Dad is by Robert Kiyosaki is, yes, a lot of people have read it, but whatever way gets people interested in financial literacy, in investing, it doesn't really matter, right? He's definitely a polarizing figure. People love him, people hate him, but it doesn't matter. All that matters is that people are saying, let me think outside the box of a different way on something. And however we kind of get to here, to that point, is just really kind of cool. The home builder thing is definitely a great addition to it, but it's interesting now. I feel like you either have a lot of investors that want to become realtors, or you end up with the realtors that then kind of are sitting there being like, well, I'm helping all these investors. Maybe I should do this myself. So it's interesting that you're on that side. How do you feel, if at all, that being a realtor has helped you become an investor?
Yeah. So I think as an investor, you have to have your hands in every single aspect of a transaction. You have to understand financials, legal, the in and outs of a home. I think being a realtor, you get hands-on experience learning all of those things on the job. So you're attending home inspections, you're learning how to identify problems with a roof, problems with a foundation, things that, if you're just getting started and you haven't gone through that, you might not know how to identify those things. I think the biggest benefit of being a realtor is the amount of relationships that you build. You're just constantly talking to people in different spaces, like building relationships with mortgage brokers. You're trying to, get to know contractors that can help your clients. And then if you decide to invest, you can use some of those relationships and that relationship building skill set, and you can sort of build out your investor network of people that are part of your team. So I think, just being able to kind of put all the pieces together, you're kind of just a constant problem solver. And you need to be a people person. You need to be able to ask for what you want and what you need, and make sure you can kind of identify and assess the people that come into your network to help you get there. So for me, I would say a lot of people ask me, do you need to have your license to be successful in investing? 100% no. But if you happen to be licensed and you're interested in, investing, it's a no-brainer to, try that skill set and put your money. Honestly, it's really about putting the money that you're making in a place that can go a lot further for you than just, the bank. So yeah, that's a great question.
Correct. And it's also kind of putting your money where your mouth is as a realtor. And I agree. I think if you are a realtor already, it will help you be an investor. But I completely agree. If you are an investor, you do not need to get your license. I've said this many times on this podcast. I have no intention of ever getting my license. It is not something I plan on doing. That's something I'm going to leave to you and the other experts. But I can definitely see how, once again, having that knowledge or being a contractor, right, would be helpful to kind of lead you to this path of then being an investor, for sure.
Absolutely.
So what was the other question I was going to ask in there? So now all of a sudden you are deciding, okay, I'm helping all these other people be investors. What made you then take that leap?
So honestly, it was sort of a fear of missing out. I felt like I did the whole 10 years of reading the books and analysis paralysis, and I would always see deals in my market. But what kind of got in my way, I guess I'll start there, is I'm in a really expensive market. I'm in the Philadelphia suburbs. It was hard to kind of find deals that met what I thought was my criteria. So I actually ventured out of my market and started to kind of look at turnkey companies. I wanted to try to find a way to get into investing that had a little bit less risk than assuming, a larger renovation project, for example, or a flip. The idea of buying something that was already ready to rent, the numbers made sense, meaning it cash flowed from day one, was just a really simple goal of mine. So I interviewed a bunch of turnkey companies and ended up finding somebody that's only a couple hours from where I live, but offered fully turnkey property management in place. And I decided just to bite the bullet and dive into it head first. And honestly, it's been, I did that one deal and honestly was ready to do another one within a couple of months. So that's how I got started. I tried to kind of find a solution that met my risk tolerance and, what I was comfortable with kind of geographically. Found, like I said, found this partner and just kind of did it.
And I like the idea of even starting with that turnkey. And a lot of people will do that because you're right. It's a great kind of foot in the door and allows you to kind of get to learn, but yes, with a little bit less risk. But also when you're talking about already working a full-time job, being a mom, being a realtor on the side, it also is probably a little helpful to say, you know what, I can do with a little less cash flow, but something that's really going to give me a lot more time freedom because I'm not managing contractors. I'm not managing an entire rehab. So it's probably a great introduction. Now, you said that you interviewed a lot of different turnkey companies. Can you give us a couple examples of questions that you asked turnkey companies to see if they would be right for you?
Yes, absolutely. So one of the things that I learned up front is that it's really important for you to be clear about your criteria that you're looking for. And what I mean by that is turnkey to me means the property is already sort of renovated, up to date. So all systems are up to date. The property is in fully move-in condition, and there is either tenants that will be placed upon closing and or built-in property management. So that was very important to me to have all of those things lined up. Some turnkey companies that I talked to, I would ask about property management fees is a big one. There's a lot of fluctuation there, which can very quickly eat into your cash flow. I'm a huge believer in outsourcing where you can. I know a lot of people like to do self-management, which is amazing from a learning perspective. But if you can ask up front what some of those fees are that they're going to take to manage the property for you, also what their fees are to lease the property. Some property management, turnkey companies charge a hefty fee to place a tenant for you. The other thing too is really to ask, is it truly turnkey? Some say it's turnkey, but then, there's repairs that need to be done, or, they're expecting that you're going to be leasing it yourself and maybe self-managing it. So I think it's important for you to know, what is it that I'm looking for? What are those boxes I need to have checked? And then see if those companies meet that criteria.
No, agreed. There's other turnkeys that turnkey can mean very different things to different people. So it is important to talk to a company to figure out what exactly turnkey means to them. I've actually worked with a turnkey company myself also in the past, so I will make sure to put a link down in the show notes for anybody that's interested in learning more about turnkey properties. So, okay, Krista, now you got your first property. We went with the turnkey business model for that one. Then you already said, as soon as you closed on that one, you knew you were ready for the next one. So what did you do next?
Yeah, so there are a couple things. The one thing I mentioned at the beginning is building those relationships in this whole process and keeping them is very important. So through the turnkey process, I met the most amazing realtor who is actually in the market where my property was. And so we started kind of talking about, what's next, how she can help me with kind of building out my portfolio. And I decided to deviate a bit from the turnkey model and do what I call the finding sort of like a grandma special. Which in my mind, that's, you find a property that needs just cosmetic updating, not full gut, not really any renovations, just kind of fresh coat of paint, fixing, nail pops and things like that.
Get rid of the wallpaper, get rid of, the avocado color bathroom, right? The grandma special. I like that. We're going to make sure to use that term here.
Yes, absolutely. So I worked with her to find another property in the same exact market. I didn't want to really shy away from what was working. It's a very booming area, great economics. All of the indicators there are really strong. So I actually got under agreement on my second property sight unseen. I trusted my realtor enough to kind of walk the property for me, do video, send me photos. And I actually saw the property for the first time when we did our home inspection. So I found a very similar single family setup to my first property, but again, it needed a little bit more kind of sweat equity, love, and attention before we went ahead and leased it. But the benefit of building that relationship with the realtor is she actually had recommended a handyman contractor that helped me get the property ready to rent in a very short amount of time for a really, great cost. So and through that little bit of work, it took a couple weeks. And then she actually helped me lease it as well. She placed the tenant for me. And because it's in the same market, I handed it over to the same property management company who ended up giving me a bit of a discount because it was property number 2 with them. So yeah, that was within a year of the first one. And I kind of repeated all of the steps, but I think what you learn is you can do everything much faster and much more efficiently the more times you repeat it. So yeah, that's kind of how I tackled that second one.
I love that now with the second one, you said, okay, I did turnkey the first time. This time I'm going to do, cosmetic updates, things of that nature. We didn't just then jump to a flip, right? So I like that you're kind of saying, okay, each time we can maybe take on a little bit more of that type of process. And what also I'd like to point out in your story is that since you stayed in the same market, you were able to use the same team, right? So even though you're talking still same state, right? You were a couple hours away. So it still kind of counts in my book for long distance investing. And what we either need to do is if we then say, okay, well, this one I'm going to buy in Kansas City, the next one I want to buy in Houston, Texas. Well, now we have to go and find all of those people all over again. I love in your story, probably something that saved you a ton of time and also money, it sounds like here with the property manager, was that you were able to say, I found good people. Let me stick with those good people and continue to give them business and build those relationships.
Yep.
I also love that you as a realtor used a realtor.
Yes.
I feel like very often investors want to become a realtor to save themselves money. And I think sometimes we are really almost putting ourselves at a disadvantage in certain situations, because like you're saying, you are a realtor in your area, but not necessarily in this other area. So it was great that you decided to still be able to say, let me use an expert for this specific space. And then it also came along with all these added benefits of this then handyman that was able to do the work for you. So if you had said, no, I'm going to do it myself, and you're going to save yourself a couple bucks, then it probably, which, it would have ended up that then you would have probably spent more money trying to find a contractor or probably find the wrong contractor. Things go wrong and then have to end up with the right one in the end.
Yep. So that's exactly right.
I'm glad you did that. So now, okay. So now we got 2 properties and you did that within the span of a year, right?
Just a little over a year. Yeah.
Just a little over a year. Gotcha. So now we have 2 properties in a similar market. What do you do next?
That's a great question. So I'm actually under agreement now for my first multifamily property, which is a huge kind of step forward and going into a space that I'm really kind of interested in and focused on now, which is leveraging the BRRRR strategy. I'm sure a lot of your listeners are probably familiar with the BRRRR strategy, but basically buying a property, rehabbing it, renting it out, refinancing the property, and then recycling your money essentially to kind of keep growing your portfolio that way. So kind of going in a different direction, I knew that I needed to get really clear on what I wanted to do next. So I started to sort of reach out to my network, Facebook groups for the market that I'm in, and just ask for what I'm looking for. So I put out some messages and started making some calls, and I actually uncovered a building that a seller was looking to sell. He's looking to retire from the business. And I ended up going out to see it. It's in the exact same market on the exact same street as one of my properties, which I know, Becky, you can relate to that, having properties in locations. And I made him an offer, and he accepted it. And we're kind of going through the due diligence now of the inspection and identifying, what we need to do to kind of get it up to market value. But the goal is going to be to clean up the property and raise the rents, refinance it to, get our money back and rent it out to long-term tenants. So it's been a huge whirlwind for me. It's kind of the unknown, a little bit scary. But I'm super excited to be able to try something different. And I think really be able to scale faster by not, using all of my own money, right? By recycling some of that money that I'm putting into this property. So that's where I'm at right now. Like I said, it's a big undertaking, but the goal is to really try to scale up from here a lot faster.
And it's also what we talked about with the second property. We now started with the turnkey property, then we did a little more work. Now we're taking on a quadplex, right? So each time, I love that you're kind of growing with this. So you can use the skills that you learned, the last deal that you had, but then also you're kind of pushing the envelope now and saying, well, let me kind of now move into something a little bit different, maybe a little bit riskier, but also now that you've kind of honed your skills on the basics, it makes sense then to kind of go to a little bit more advanced strategies to be able to grow your portfolio. So I want to go back to how you found this property off of Facebook.
Yes.
Right. So can you walk us through a little bit more about how you did that? Like, did you just go post on like your personal page? Like, hey, I want to buy a house. Anybody want to sell theirs, or how did you do that?
No. And it's interesting because I'm not super big on personal social media, like on Facebook. So what I did was I'm in a group for the market that I'm in. It's actually an investor group. And just kind of taking a couple steps back, I needed to get really clear about what I was looking for. So I was in that you need to put out there exactly the price point, the type of property that you can close fast, that you can pay cash, all of the things that you bring to the table. And I say that meaning you don't need to say all of those things I just said, but when you're developing your criteria, you need to make sure that you're crystal clear. And I put a message in this group that has a couple thousand people, everybody from investors, contractors, you name it, you know the drill. There's investor groups are made up of wholesalers, all different types of people. So I put a post out there that said, here's what I'm looking for. I'm an experienced investor. I can close quickly. And I actually had a seller send me a message and said, give me a call. I might have something that will work for you. And we ended up talking for a lot longer than I expected. And he told me his whole story. He was really excited that I was kind of younger and still on the beginning parts of my path, if you will. And he said, I'm looking to hand these buildings off. Multiple things that he kind of put out there. So yeah, I just proactively put a message in this group. And I got an instant lead from it. So I think the hardest part of doing this is just doing it. It's just putting yourself out there and asking for what you need and what you want, knowing that once you do that, you're going to get it back. Somebody's going to see it. Someone's going to tell someone else, and they're going to give you exactly what you're looking for.
I love what you did here. There were so many things that I just kind of want to highlight that you just said there. One, actually, the first thing that you said in there that I want to make sure to point out for our listeners in case they didn't catch it is that you wrote that you were an experienced investor. I love that you did that. You had already kind of mentioned that for many years, you were kind of in that analysis paralysis kind of stage where you're reading this, but you weren't kind of taking action. I love that you got to the point where you felt confident to say, I'm an experienced investor. This is who I am, right? You weren't like, oh, but I only have 2 properties, or, oh, I only have been doing this for a few years. You went out there and you really said, this is who I am. And I think even through a Facebook post, that confidence really kind of comes through. So I love that you just even started it with that. I also love that you tried something new, right? Instead of going through the MLS, instead of kind of using this network, you said, I need to be able to grow my network and I need to start thinking of some other options rather than just being in a portal listing with a realtor and just waiting and see what comes through. So I love that even social media not being your thing, you said, you know what, it can't hurt. Yeah. And then third, I love that you actually talked about the criteria that you were looking for. I am in also a lot of these groups where people will say like, hey, I'm looking for a property. And then you're like, great. I'm glad you're looking for a property. I'm pretty sure everybody else in this group, the other thousands of people, are also looking for a property. Therefore, if I knew of a property in mind, I'm not going to keep you in mind. I'm not going to reach out to you because you gave me no parameters of what you're actually looking for. I have people that will come to me all the time and be like, oh, well, I'm looking for a property in New York. And I'm like, okay, then got it. But I have no idea if they're a cash buyer. I have no idea if they're looking for a multifamily, a single family, if they're looking for, if they have a particular cap rate that they're looking for, a specific cash flow that they're looking for. I don't know if their budget's $100,000 or $1,000,000, right? So the fact that you got really clear, what I think is so cool about that is that you had a seller reach out to you so that way you could buy his property. Like,
Yeah.
I really don't think that like any of our listeners could want for anything else than someone saying like, hey, actually, I have the very property that you were looking for.
Yep.
So I am so proud that you got out of your comfort zone a little bit, doing something in a Facebook group, and look what the universe kind of rewarded you with
Right.
was kind of that property there. So that's fantastic. I'm glad that you got to a place with that property where you were in that due diligence stage. And we'll definitely talk about that a little bit more. But it sounds like you've had like this great kind of flow of success moving through these properties. Since then, you moved forward and bought that first property. Was there ever a point in time where you either kind of doubted yourself and then were like, oh my God, I can't do this, or fell back into analysis paralysis or got stuck somewhere?
Yes, for sure. I think every investor will be able to tell you exactly what those moments are for them. For
Yeah,
me,
that was a little bit of a loaded question. I
yeah,
clearly knew that the answer was going to be yes. But
yes. And it's honestly a work in progress, right? Like these moments are going to keep coming up. I think what I've learned is that you have to just acknowledge it, recognize where it's coming from, and then use the tools that you have to kind of get over that. But for me, I think it's not staying focused on what I know works. It's kind of, you actually gave a really good example earlier where you said that you have a property in this state and then you look in another state or another state. I think just kind of not being focused. But I would say the biggest obstacle for me was number one, not having crystal clear criteria. And part of that is looking all around the world and looking at what everybody else is doing. And number two, the financing and the kind of lending / creative financing aspect of buying properties. I think just touching on number two first, because it's a little bit simpler. I always thought that you needed to have tons and tons of money to buy real estate, to be an investor, because what we're shown is, these people buying multi-million-dollar multifamily buildings and things like that. But I realized really quickly that what you need to be able to do is identify your criteria and get a deal and get it under contract to purchase. And then the money will follow. You'll figure out how to fund your deal, whether it's through your network, whether it's through private lending or traditional financing or whatever it is. The biggest part of this is finding that deal and then trusting that the money will follow once that deal's in place. The second part of this, in terms of the crystal clear criteria, which is actually how I obviously met you, Becky. I was having a really hard time figuring out, what do I do next? These first two properties were really simple. They seemed kind of too good to be true, too easy, which were my own limiting beliefs. Of course, we all have them. So I reached out and said, I need help. I need help figuring out, what do I do next and how do I stay focused? So I actually worked, closely. We worked closely together to identify what exactly I was looking for. And a lot of that was helping me just get unstuck from getting out of my own way, being really clear on, here's the types of properties that work for you. Here's what works for your personality, for your risk tolerance, for where your passions are, and kind of bringing all of those things to the table. So I think just going through our, sessions and our kind of coaching and relationship, coupling that with really understanding the financials of how you make deals happen, regardless of, what you think, those were some of my biggest obstacles. And at this point, I feel like that's really in the past. And whenever those beliefs start to come up, or if I get doubts, I just say, you just have to go forward. You can't go back and look at all of the things you used to think or mistakes that maybe you made. You just have to keep going forward. So yeah, I mean, those are two of the biggest things that have definitely gotten in my way. And I'm sure they're going to come up again as I keep going ahead.
And those are also, those two situations are going to be things that are kind of recurring, right? Now, yes, you decided for this property and you went with a multifamily. That was part of your criteria of saying, I wanted a multifamily. This was the neighborhood. This was the price point, and you kind of had your parameters for what that looked like. Every single time you kind of go out there to say, okay, I'm now looking for my next property, you have the opportunity to actually update and kind of change that criteria. Maybe then you say, you know what, I do want to go get that vacation home that I'm also gonna Airbnb down in Virginia Beach, right? So your criteria is always changing. But sometimes, and I feel like the point where when we started working together was that there were almost too many options. That it was like, okay, well, I could go to Florida, I could stay here in Pennsylvania, I could buy a multifamily, I could do a single family. Do I want to do short-term rentals? Do I want to do long-term rentals? And I agree that one of the things that with our society, the way that social media works is that we're watching what everybody else is doing. And we end up kind of getting that FOMO and kind of chasing after, like, oh, this is what this person's doing. Maybe I should do this. Oh, but now I scrolled on Instagram and saw this person did this. And I think what really worked so well for you when we were working together was kind of say, but what is best for Krista? Not what's best for this person on Instagram or this person on Instagram, but what works best with Krista's day job, with Krista's family life, with Krista's goals, with where you wanted to kind of get in the future. And then made sure that as we came up with what that criteria should be that you were looking for, really kind of went back to saying, well, is this something that's going to actually work for you for your lifestyle? And for really to work in progress of what you actually wanted to accomplish, right? I feel like often I see people that are like, well, flipping is the most popular. I decided to do the BRRRR. So I went with that. And now I hate working with contractors. It's so hard. I don't get to see my kids because I'm overseeing these contractors, these men that are driving me nuts. And they're kind of like, well, this isn't what I wanted to do. And then it really ends up souring real estate investing for them because they are doing somebody else's dream rather than their own. So
Right.
I'm happy that you kind of said, hey, I need some help. I need help getting some focus, and I need help kind of figuring out what is best for me, not what is best for everybody else I'm seeing on Instagram.
Yep. Yeah. No,
So,
exactly it.
so when we were working together, was getting clear on like a criteria one of the things that was the most helpful for you to getting unstuck?
Yes, I think being crystal clear on the criteria and understanding how to get your financials in order to move forward. So after going through all of those exercises, I felt like I had this really well-established toolkit where I could say, okay, when that property comes up or when I identify that property, I can then push execute on different levers, if you will, pull different levers that are going to allow me to move forward and to close and to kind of get the next one under my belt as quickly as I can. So I think those were probably my two biggest takeaways from going through the work that we did together was understanding like when you find it, because you've identified your criteria, you can execute because you've gotten all of the, possibilities for how you're going to fund your deal, the financing, all of those types of things. So though that was definitely, I think, one of the biggest takeaways for me.
Yeah, well, that to me was what like I would want in that situation, right? I don't want to just know like, okay, how do I do this one deal? And then okay, that's it. I would want to know like, okay, let's have those tools in my toolkit here, that I know if this situation arises, I know what I need and kind of how to navigate that issue. So then that way, to me, it's almost like turning on like a water spigot, right? I'm saying like, okay, I want like another property. Now I just have to be able to turn this on, go through the process for whichever property or type of property that it actually is, and then be like, okay, cool, I got it. Now we can kind of turn that spigot off. But you always have the availability to kind of go back for more because now you have the skills. And what I think was also interesting with some of the work that we did together was we talked more about just real estate stuff. We also went through kind of some general finance stuff and made sure that you were in the right position to move forward with how you wanted to grow your portfolio. And also we did get to work on some mindset stuff and to also make sure that we were priming ourselves. I think, especially as women, sometimes you always feel a little bit behind the eight ball, especially when it comes to real estate or investing or things just kind of financially related. And I think that that's something that we need to kind of always be working through and say, like, no, I am an experienced investor. I am knowledgeable in this. I can have a conversation and I am going to be successful in it. And I think you did a lot of work on prepping yourself for some of this success, let alone just learning how to run some numbers, you know?
Yep. That's all. I think the mindset piece is huge in everything that you just said. I think we need to be constantly telling ourselves that we are where we need to be. That's the biggest message, is that you're not supposed to be where someone else is. You're not supposed to be where you used to be, but you're exactly where you need to be. And that you don't have any limits. Any limits that we put out there are created by ourselves and they're not real. And the more that you kind of use your network and surround yourself with people that are doing the same things as you, and kind of eliminate either the people or the thoughts or whatever that just doesn't kind of serve your purpose and keep you on that path. I think the more opportunity you're giving yourself to succeed. So I think for me, I realize that I'm the only one that's going to get me where I want to go. And I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. You know, the path doesn't have a beginning and the end. That's something I always love to say, is it's always there. You just have to be okay with where you're at. And so, I think everybody needs to know that you can do it. You know, you just have to figure out, what do you want to do? And then why do you want to do it? Yeah, I mean, I think there's plenty of room at the table, right? We always say that.
Absolutely. So now we know where you are now then, right?
Yeah.
We're now evaluating this multifamily deal that you found. But what's next for Krista?
Yeah, I mean, so now that I'm kind of dabbling in this BRRRR multifamily, what I'd love to be able to do is continue to grow my portfolio using that strategy. So knowing that I can use, I keep using the term recycling your money, but essentially grow and scale quicker by being able to, improve the value of properties by using that strategy. I want to be able to do that until, I can sit comfortably and, consider kind of diving into being an investor full time. That's been my goal kind of in my heart of hearts for the last couple of years, is let's figure out how to, put all the pieces in place and kind of become a full-time investor. So I'm using this to, hold me accountable to kind of continue on this path to get there. But I also love giving back. So, I love helping other people. I love, sharing what I've learned and, giving back stories and examples and, sharing my network with other people. So I hope as I continue to grow that I can continue to kind of help other people, especially women, women that are feeling stuck or that are feeling like I can't do this, or I don't have enough time or money or all the things that you said. I really want to be able to help other people get started on their journey. So yeah, I mean, that's where I'm at, and that's where I kind of see myself going.
I love it. I love also that, like, that pay it forward kind of idea of, like, now, one, I love the fact that now we're talking about, we went from turnkey properties to, I know you're going to end up doing like a full rehab at some point.
Yeah,
right? Like, that's the direction you're absolutely going here. And then we're also then talking about how are we going to be able to help uplift the next woman coming up to kind of get into that same spot and be able to help with some of the things that you kind of went through, and how we can make that just easier for the next person. And honestly, I think that's kind of embodies exactly what we're all about at Lady Landlords, is just passing on the knowledge that we learned to make somebody else's journey just that much easier than our own was. So I'm definitely happy that you found us.
Yeah. Lady Landlords has been instrumental in a lot of what I've done, especially because what you find is that you're not alone. I think knowing that there's people that are doing every aspect of everything related to real estate investing, that are women, that they can either give you advice, commiserate with you, or tell you, don't worry, it's going to be okay. I've been there, done that. We're all okay. And we're all here to help each other. I think that's how we move forward. So, I mean, what you've created is honestly, it's amazing for us to have each other. And you're exactly, we we can only do this with the help of people that are just like us. So yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
That was really completely my mission for starting the group. So it is so nice to then actually seeing it come to fruition and really kind of helping in the way that I was hoping. So that makes me really happy to hear that. To kind of wrap up then, anything that you would like for our listeners to either know about like your journey or about some piece of advice that you feel like would be helpful to just kind of close up your story with, that you would like to share?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that when you think about like, if you haven't gotten started yet, this is a message for people that are maybe wanting to be an investor and feeling like you can't, or feeling like it's not for you or it's too difficult. I would say, number one, find a mentor, find somebody that you trust, that you can connect with, and just follow what they're doing, offer to help them, offer to kind of shadow what they're doing. That's the best way to learn. But number two is just get started, just do something. Read books, listen to podcasts, join Facebook communities like Lady Landlords, of course, but just do something. I think so many people have the analysis paralysis or just don't get started because they're scared. I think the more risks that you take by just putting yourself out there and connecting with people, success will find you and you will get exactly what you are looking for if you take action. So that's my message: is go out there, take action, talk to people, and find a mentor. So hopefully that message is helpful for those of you that are kind of out there looking for, how do I do this? How do I get started?
No, that's great. I completely agree with you. Like that taking action. Our first deal is going to be our first deal. It's not going to be perfect. It's not always going to be the absolute home run of the century here, but it's going to teach you so much. It's going to be able to then set you up for those next properties. And honestly, the best thing about real estate, the best day to get involved in real estate is today. It really is. It makes such a difference when you finally start like actually playing in the game here. So I'm really happy that you encourage our listeners to just get out there and start making moves. Second, for anybody that is interested in the Lady Landlords mentorship program that Krista went through, I will also make sure to put a link down in the show notes there, so that way you can learn more. Listen, if not for you, that's totally fine. I am happy to find you the right person to be able to help you along your way. But definitely take a look at what we are doing within Lady Landlords. That might just be a great opportunity for you to get the help that you need to get unstuck and to get moving and growing that portfolio. So I will make sure to link that down there for you. Otherwise, Krista, thank you so much for being on this week's episode of the Lady Landlords podcast. I will see you and all the other ladies back in the Lady Landlords Facebook group. And if you have not taken opportunity to make sure to subscribe either here on your podcast, or if you're watching us on YouTube, make sure to subscribe so that way you will get notified when we come out with next week's episode every single Tuesday. So Krista, thanks again for being here today.
Thanks, Becky.